The road had gone to dust long before she found it, a pale ribbon cutting through the prairie like a scar. She walked it barefoot, dress hem torn, hair knotted with days of wind, holding her baby close as though he were the last warm thing in the world. His breath came thin, like the flutter of a bird's wings, and she counted each one in silence, afraid the next might not come. The land around her stretched forever, dry grass bowing under the weight of heat, horizon trembling in the sun. There had been mornings once not long ago when the same sun had warmed her porch and caught the copper in her hair. She had baked bread then, waiting for him to return with firewood, believing in his smile and the way he said they'd build a life here. That was before hunger set its teeth on them, before he turned his face from hers and left. He had left her with an empty cupboard, a hollow cabin, and a child not yet old enough to know why his mother's tears wet his blanket. Now she was days into the walking. Nights had been worse, coyotes calling like grief, stars so sharp they felt like needles above her. She had eaten nothing but bitter roots, saving what little she found for the child. Her milk had nearly stopped, the baby's cry had grown thin, angry, then exhausted. By the third day she could see a fence line far ahead, posts standing like sentries. Past them, the faint outline of a house. She nearly wept at the sight. Evening was falling by the time she reached the yard. The sky burned red, sun dragging its last light across the prairie. Chickens stirred in the dust, and a windmill creaked in the breeze. She stood still for a long moment, swaying on her feet, afraid that if she knocked no one would answer, or worse, that they would. The baby stirred and began to whimper. She swallowed her fear and went to the door. Her knuckles rapped against the wood. Once, twice. The sound seemed to echo into every shadow. Footsteps came from inside, slow, steady, like the tread of a man who never hurried. The door opened, and there he was. The rancher filled the doorway. He was young, younger than she had expected, with the kind of face the land carves into a man. His skin was darkened by sun, his hair mussed as if the wind had claimed it. He said nothing, only looked at her with eyes that were not unkind but unreadable, like deep water. Her voice caught on the first word. It had been days since she'd spoken to another soul. "I have nothing," she said, shifting the baby so he could see. "No food left. Not for me, not for him." The man didn't speak. His gaze went from her face to the child and back. The silence pressed on her until she felt it in her throat. "I can trade," she said. The words came like stones. "You can take him. Just give me bread enough to walk on. Please." For a heartbeat nothing moved. Only the wind stirred dust around their boots. Then the man's jaw shifted. Without a word, he turned from the door and disappeared into the dark of the house. Her knees nearly gave. She held the baby tighter, half ready to run. A part of her thought he had turned her away, that he would come back with a rifle, tell her to leave his land. But when the door opened again, he was carrying a small loaf of bread and a tin cup of milk. He held them out, wordless. She took them with hands that trembled. The smell of bread nearly undid her. She sank to her knees right there on the porch, broke off a piece, and ate as if she had been waiting her whole life for it. The man didn't move. He stood over her, a stillness about him that was neither cruel nor pitying, simply quiet, as though he had seen such things before. When she had eaten, he pointed toward the barn, with a tilt of his chin. "You can sleep there," he said at last, voice low, rough as gravel but not unkind. She nodded. Gratitude swelled too big to fit into words. The barn smelled of hay and animals, a deep, living warmth. She laid her baby down on a bed of straw, fed him from the tin cup until his crying softened into hiccups, then into breathing. For the first time in days, she exhaled without fear that no breath would follow. Later, when the stars had come out, the man came again. He brought a blanket and left it near her without a word. She watched him in the half-dark, the easy way he moved, the patience in his step. He didn't ask her who she was or where she had come from. He didn't ask why she had offered to give away her child. He simply let her stay. She wrapped the blanket around herself, lay back against the straw, and listened to the night settle. The wind rattled the barn roof, the cattle shifted in their pens, and somewhere beyond, a coyote yipped at the moon. Through a crack in the wall, she saw him again, a dark figure walking the fence line with a lantern. His light bobbed softly, like a firefly crossing the prairie. He moved with the certainty of a man who belonged to the land, who had weathered its storms and found a way to keep standing. She closed her eyes, her body aching but no longer afraid. Something deep in her, deeper than hunger, deeper than grief, began to thaw. For the first time since she'd left the cabin, she thought she might wake tomorrow. She might keep walking. And maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to walk alone. Morning came soft and silver, the light slipping through the barn's slats like threads of mercy. She woke to find a pail of fresh milk and a heel of bread set near the door, the man already gone to his work. For a moment she simply stared at them, the quiet generosity of it catching in her chest. Then she smiled, small, startled, and drank while the baby stirred against her, warm and alive. Outside, the ranch stretched under a pale sky, smelling of dew and earth. She watched him from the barn doorway as he moved among the cattle, steady as clockwork, his shirt darkened with sweat, his hat low against the sun. He did not look toward her, but she felt as if he knew she was there, watching, breathing, beginning to belong. When he came back toward the house at midday, he carried a length of wood under his arm. She thought he would pass her by, but instead he stopped near the barn, set down his tools, and began to work. His hands were sure, shaping something from the scraps. It took her a moment to realize he was fashioning a small cradle, plain, rough, but strong. She knelt beside him, wordless. The smell of sawdust filled the air. When it was finished, he stood, brushed the shavings from his palms, and nodded toward the baby, as if to say, "Here." She laid the child in it, tears stinging her eyes at the simple kindness of it. After that, the days grew gentle, though they were filled with work. She swept the barn, gathered eggs, fed the chickens with grain he left in a bucket. He never told her to do these things, never asked, but neither did he stop her. The baby's cheeks began to round, his cries less desperate, and at night she no longer woke in fear. Once a trader came by the ranch, a rough man with a smile too wide and eyes too quick. He looked at her in a way that made her skin crawl, made her pull the baby close. He asked questions, where she'd come from if she meant to stay. When she did not answer, he laughed and made a crude offer, loud enough to turn the air sour. The rancher stepped from the barn then, quiet but iron still. His shadow fell long across the dirt. "Get off my land," he said, his voice so calm it made the man blink. The trader spat, muttered, but left. Dust followed him down the road. Her heart thudded against her ribs. She watched the rancher's face, looking for anger, but there was only a faint hardening around the eyes. He did not look at her as he went back to his work, but she understood what had passed between them. He had chosen to stand between her and the world. That night, she brought him a cup of coffee, the only way she could think to say what words could not. He took it, their hands brushing. For a moment his gaze held hers, steady, unflinching. Then he nodded once and drank. They began to speak in small ways. She told him about the cabin she had left, about the man who had promised her safety, and then gone when she needed him most. He listened without interrupting, his hands still as stones on the table. When she was done, he only said, "You kept walking." As if that alone was the proof of her strength. The sky changed the day the storm came. Morning broke heavy, low clouds rolling over the hills. The wind picked up until it moaned through the posts. By late afternoon the light had gone green and strange, the air sharp with the smell of rain. He moved fast then, latching shutters, driving the stock into shelter. She ran to gather what she could, baby tight against her chest, heart beating like a drum. The first strike of lightning lit the yard in a ghostly flash, followed by a crack of thunder that shook the barn. When the wind tore loose a section of the smaller pen, he was already there, rope in hand, trying to drag it back into place. She saw the walls shudder, saw the danger, and without thinking she was beside him, holding the post while rain lashed them both. "Get inside," he shouted over the roar, but she shook her head. Together they braced it until the wind gave way, until the storm passed as suddenly as it had come. Afterward, they stood panting in the dark, soaked through, hair plastered to their faces. Lightning flickered far off now, like the sky had grown tired. She felt his coat come around her shoulders, warm despite the rain, his hand steady against her back. He walked her toward the house, baby safe in her arms. For the first time he opened the front door wide, led her inside. The air was warm, fire crackling in the hearth, the smell of coffee lingering. He set 3 places at the table, one for him, one for her, one for the child. The act was so simple, so final, that she felt her breath catch. Later, when the house had gone quiet, she sat near the fire, the baby asleep in her lap. He sat across from her, boots drying by the hearth, face softened in the glow. Neither spoke, because there was no need. The storm had taken something from the sky, but it had given something back to them. She closed her eyes, let the warmth of the fire seep into her bones. For the first time in months, she felt not just safe but claimed, as if the land had made room for her. Outside, the prairie steamed under the moonlight, washed clean. Tomorrow there would be fences to mend, puddles to drain, a world to put back together. But tonight, she was here. And for the first time since her life had split apart, she was not walking alone. If this heartfelt Wild West tale moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories under the prairie stars.